I told you last week I was going to share a little bit about my story and how through the Lord building self-control, developing self-control in my heart that caused me to lose 57 pounds in 18 months and to keep it off for I think 9 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. It seems just like yesterday when me and the treadmill first met. But this is the second week we're talking about self-control, and I don't really know how else to really get us to embrace this without just applying it and really jumping into a real life topic. And so we're going to do that this week and next week. Next week we're going to talk about financial management and talk about some things with that. Certainly an area that requires some self-control. But today we're going to focus on health and fitness. And before we jump into that, I think it's probably fair to say by now, many of us that have made New Year's resolutions, they've probably gone by the wayside. When I used to work out at St. John's Fitness in Springfield for years, and I kind of got to know some of the guys that were regulars in there, and we'd be in there and we'd be talking about, you would have this flood of people in January, like from the 2nd of January for the first few weeks, and I mean it would be packed in there. People everywhere, and then just doing all kinds of crazy things with weights, and you have people running around the track when you couldn't hardly get on the track because there were so many people, and we actually called them New Year's resolutions. I know it's really terrible. We should have gotten to know them and learned their names and such, but we knew they were just going to be here and gone, and sure enough, the last week of January would roll around and they would all kind of trickled off to whatever resolution they'd made. That kind of fell away and they were done with that, and we would never see them again except for maybe next year when they tried again to get in shape and to do that. And so if that's you today, you need to just look at that and say, man, I may have started strong and I've fallen off, but it doesn't have to be like that. You may have to kind of do some examining there and ask yourself the question, what happened? Why did I fall off? Why wasn't I able to keep that commitment, that resolution that I made? Maybe it had nothing to do with health. Maybe it was something completely different. Maybe you're going to spend more time with your kids. Maybe you're going to make better financial decisions. Maybe you're going to serve the Lord on a long-term mission trip, or on a short-term, hopefully not a long-term, but that would be awesome if you did. But I don't know if anyone that's planning that right now, but on a short-term mission trip to Ukraine or Suriname this summer. Hopefully there were some things like that. Maybe some of those things are still in place for you. But as we come and we look at that struggle, that difficulty, whatever it is, whatever that challenge is, you have to remember that you made that resolution, you made that decision because it's something you struggle with. And so there's an underlying theme there. If you started strong and you quit, there's an underlying theme if that happens a lot in your life. And that's that issue of self-control, of making commitment to do something and following through on that commitment. I want to look, as we get into this, at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. So if you've got your Bibles, if you turn to that. Had some great Bible turning from our kids last week. Had a little bit of a race, and that was exciting. So we're not necessarily going to have to race today, but if you guys want to take a minute and turn to that, kids. Again, that's 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19. Let me read that for us. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, which you have from God, and that you are not your own? For you were bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body. Now we could easily misconstrue this verse to make it think that it's all about our external appearance. That's not really what's being talked about here. It's about ourself, our body, being used for God's glory, being used for His purposes, for His reasons. And so I think the first thing that we have to recognize in any issue, including the issues we're going to talk about today in our health, that God is the owner of our body. He's the one that gave it to us, and He wants to use us for His glory. All right, so that's a beginning point, I think, a beginning point to understand why we're created the way we are, why we have physical bodies. And God gave us those things to use those things. Now for me, this verse was a part of that decision for me, because I realized that my effectiveness in ministry, my effectiveness as a dad, my effectiveness as a husband was going to be impaired if I didn't have the physical ability to get up and do the things that I needed to do. Play with my kids, be in good health so I was ready to preach or lead worship or whatever the situation was at the time. And there are times when we so resign ourselves with our health that we sometimes we can't get off the couch. We've hurt our back, we've hurt our a muscle or a joint or something, and we're physically impaired. We're physically prevented from doing the work that God has set before us. Now, sometimes that's not our fault. Sometimes there's nothing that we can do about that. You're at work and something happens with a piece of machinery and you're injured. There's nothing you could have done to prevent that. But a lot of the time, and if you ask, it's interesting, try this out. Go ask someone who's a surgeon or who works at the hospital. They'll tell you that most of the time the injuries that come in are self-inflicted. All right, that means they could have been prevented. But a choice was made by us people who aren't perfect, and there was a resulting injury in that. So for me personally, I realized that, of course I was, when I got married, we've been married almost 15 years now, and so I guess that was 1997 when we got married. I weighed 160 pounds, maybe like 165 pounds. Okay, I was 6'2". And if you saw me in a wedding picture, you may or may not recognize me, okay? I was a pretty scrawny guy. I was really small. So I had gone from that to 240 pounds. And this was 2003, so in 6 years, all right? So I was kind of literally, one Big Mac away from a heart attack, all right? Except fortunately I was younger and I was in my 20s then, and so I had age on my side, all right? So that was a good thing. It's good to have age on your side sometimes. But that's slowly slipping away. So anyway, I kind of made some decisions based on some of these things here from this verse where I realized that if I was going to be effective to serve God faithfully, then I was going to have to make some decisions, make some choices about my personal health in order to kind of get that ship turned around. Because, of course, at the time, it's not the end of the world, but if I kept going on that pattern, then come 50 years old, come 55 years old, I could be in some real jeopardy. I could be in some real jeopardy. So I began to research and to learn about this. Now, the first thing that I will say is that I fell into a lot of these, there's a lot of false information out there about losing weight, about getting thin, about dieting. There's a lot of false information. Why is that? Because companies would like to get in your pocket and take money out of your pocket and tell you that if you will just buy their product or work their plan, that you have to pay for, of course, usually in an ongoing way, then you can look like this. And then they put some airbrushed model, like doing some kind of ab crunches or something, real weird, funky thing on there, on the screen to make you think, oh, wow, I can look like that next week if I'll just spend $300 on this product. Okay, now fortunately I didn't fall into that, that particular marketing extreme, but sometimes we do. We want something so bad and we don't want to put in the hard work that it takes to get there. And so we open our wallets up and maybe that's money we don't even have, which we'll talk about that next week. And we spend that money and then we don't get the result we want and then we get discouraged and depressed because we're back where we started or worse. And then a vicious cycle happens and we get over and over and over in that cycle, and before long we feel defeated, discouraged, and we feel like we just can't accomplish the task that's before us. So the first thing I learned is there's no quick, easy fix. All right, if wherever you are in your health, all right, however fit or unfit you are, there is no quick, easy fix. All right, that's like anything in life. If there's a quick fix for it, then either wasn't that big of a problem, or it's just a matter of time till it falls apart. All right, anything that's worth doing, it takes hard work. It takes a fair amount of knowledge and understanding. And so I kind of jumped into all kinds of things. The first thing I did was I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to get on the treadmill and I'm just going to run myself to death and hope and see what happens. All right, so that's what I did. I got on the treadmill. I ran 4 miles. I kind of walk ran because I wasn't even really in good enough health to where I could actually run for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time. All right, so I kind of had to walk and run, alternating that, and then kind of build my way up. But pretty soon, my body got used to that. Of course, my knees were killing me, my hips were killing me, my ankles were killing me. So there was definitely the old adage, no pain, no gain, was certainly something that applied to that situation. So I ran myself crazy, and I did. I lost a lot of weight. Okay, I lost a lot of weight. Some of it was fat. Some of it was muscle and bone weight too. All right, which I learned later that losing weight is not a great goal. All right, because you don't know what kind of weight you're losing. You can be a really small, thin person, and this is going to shock some of you guys. You can be a small, thin person and be fat. All right, because it's hard to look at someone and see what's all's going on inside of there. All right. You can weigh 240 pounds and be extremely thin. Okay, so weight is not a good measure because, first of all, muscle is 5 times as dense as fat is. So muscle, this much muscle weighs the same as this much fat. All right, so we've got to kind of lose that. I mean, one of the things I learned right off is you got to lose that understanding, that marketing thing that you've seen on commercials in your mind, because it doesn't apply. You can't. There's nothing healthy about dropping weight. All right, I mean, it might be healthy if you're dropping fat, but if you're just dropping weight, that you may actually be in worse health than you're in. So that once I learned that, I thought, wow, okay, I'm going to have to really understand more about this. And then as I got into it, I began to think more about how God made us. He made our bodies to be worked. I mean, that's one thing I've learned. If He did not make our bodies to lay on the couch. I think we mentioned last week about the astronauts. The reason why we don't go to Mars, or one of the big obstacles to going to Mars, is because of the weightless problem. We don't have gravity exerting force on our bodies that strengthen us. That same thing applies to the couch. If we're kind of stuck on the couch there and there's not a lot of force being exerted on us, we're not going to make a lot of progress doing that. Our bodies just kind of fall apart because they're meant to be worked. If you have joint problems, the best thing you can do, now of course you always want to talk to a doctor before taking any medical advice, especially from someone that doesn't have a degree in exercise physiology, which that would be me. I do not have a degree in that. Then you want to do that. But one thing that is very clear in a lot of research is that using joints causes your joint to produce and excrete a special oil that lubricates that joint, and it becomes healthier and stronger. So if you have joint issues, then a lot of times, unless you have a specific medical condition that's preventing that, using them, and when we talk about using them, we're really talking about weight training for the most part, that causes those joints to become strengthened. And then as you work them more, they become stronger and stronger, and you're able to lift more weight because that's what our bodies do. They adapt. We're an amazing organism. God has made us in an amazing way because we adapt to everything, psychologically, physically, emotionally. There's so many ways that we adapt and change based on the stimulus that presents itself, or the way that things happen to us. Those things cause our bodies to change. They cause our minds to change. Of course, we know that intellectually because we are presented with certain information, and we learn that information either by viewing it or hearing it, and then we apply it, and it becomes part of our cognitive process or part of our thinking. So those things are really important as we get into this whole topic of health and fitness, to not fall into that trap of believing false information. And so first, I think we have to become students of exercise physiology to some extent, to understand what's really happening in our bodies and what's going on. Or else we're just going to end up getting into all kinds of issues. And so that kind of brings me to a verse I want us to look at in terms of motivation. It's 1 Samuel 16:7. I'll give you a second to turn to it. And I think that as we approach this whole idea, of learning about health and fitness, we approach this whole idea of saying to ourselves, I want to be healthier, I want to be thinner, I want to lose fat. I think we have to approach it with an understanding of what a right and a wrong motivation is. All right? We mentioned when we started out this afternoon that people that sometimes make a New Year's resolution, they get in the gym, and then they fall away after 2 or 3 weeks, a lot of that is because they're motivated by the wrong things. All right, let's look at what at 1 Samuel here. The Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." All right, health, being healthy, that is an internal issue. All right, it's not an external issue. We may see a lot of external results and external change, but it's an internal issue. It's an issue of the heart. If you are motivated only to look good, or maybe you look like some magazine picture, then that's always going to fail, because that motivation is built on vanity. It's vain. It's built on something that doesn't have value. All right? If it's built on, even related to that, if it's built on maybe a desire to impress people, or maybe out of pride, just to, have people notice you or look at you differently, or a lot of times the commercials for supplements and diet drugs and things will talk about how you're going to get a better job and your dating life's going to improve and all these other things if you'll just take this product. Again, that's an empty motivation, and eventually when it gets hard and it gets difficult and your self-control is put to the test, you're going to fall away. So what are some good motivations then? What are some good things to think about? Heart disease, cancer, and a number of things under that category. All of those things have been shown to be preventable by healthy eating habits and exercise. All right, other good motivations. Wanting to have more energy, wanting to just feel generally better, wanting to sleep better. All of those are good goals. Those are good, healthy things to set and to allow to be your motivation. But I think first and foremost, in all of that, if this is not something that you desire to do because of your willingness to serve the Lord, it's always going to be a struggle to be at peak motivation. We've got to keep where we started just a few moments ago. We've got to keep that idea and that realization that God has called us out for a purpose to accomplish specific things for His kingdom. And those things will not be accomplished if we inhibit our ability to do those things. So we have to recognize that God gives us a choice even in our service to Him. We can choose to be faithful and serve, or we can choose to allow other things to distract us. We give video games, TV. We harp on those things. We're constantly from the pulpit, from on Facebook, on blogs. We're constantly condemning those things. But how often do we condemn laziness? Just being sedentary. All right, just kind of hanging out, being apathetic. We're not as quick to condemn that. And why is that? I think maybe we have a little bit of a double standard, and so we've got to recognize and realize that God's called us to a purpose, and we need to rise to that occasion and be ready to accomplish those things that are before us. Well, let's go back to my story. So I started to get into health a little bit. I lost a lot of pounds really fast, although I kind of found out later I was losing a lot of bone and muscle mass. The reason why that's bad is that, number one, especially as you age, your body has a tendency to lose muscle mass and bone mass anyway because your hormones fall off. Your hormones kind of peak when you're in your teenage years, and then they start to fall off as you get into your 20s and 30s. And when that happens, you kind of submit yourself to the possibility of breakage. That's why senior adults, a lot of times when they fall, they break something, they break a bone. There's no physiological reason why that should happen, except for lack of use. As we get older, we tend to be a little less physically active. Most people do anyway. And then as you are less physically active, walking, jogging, running, skiing, hiking, whatever, then you're putting less stress on your body. And by stress, I'm not talking about like being uptight and stress in a negative sense, but a stressor is something that causes your body to react. Then your body starts to relax and thinks, well, I don't need that much bone mass. I don't need that much muscle mass. And so it uses those for energy and other sources. And before long, you're just one fall away from being in the hospital and maybe even going home to be with the Lord at that point. And so if it's your time for that to happen, well then praise God. But if it's not your time, if the Lord isn't finished with you yet, with me yet, then we ought not to put ourselves in that place. Because it's no different, I think, than just choosing to spend our time watching TV, playing video games, instead of reaching the lost and serving the Lord faithfully. I think it's the same thing in my mind. So we've got to make that connection if we're going to approach this thing right, so that we have a platform and a foundation to work from that can cause us to achieve the goals that we set. So let's talk about some of those goals. What's a good goal? What's the right thing? Well, I'm going to give you, and you could probably on the internet find these. I've kind of pulled these from several different websites, but these are what I call the top 10 myths of working out, of exercise, of eating healthily that are out there that I think probably most of you believe most of these things. All right, I mean that's been my experience. Stephanie and I, we taught the last couple years at the previous church that we served. We taught a Fitness for Life class, and I was amazed to find out that most of us are the same. We see the same commercials, we see the same ads, we sit in the same PE classes, and we've learned a lot of the same myths. And so I want to try to debunk some of those and get some of that, clear some of that false information that's out there away. First of all, the myth: sugar is bad. All right? Surely it is true that refined sugar is bad. All right? It's not good for you. For cancer patients, it accelerates the growth of those cancer cells. For healthy people, it causes us to store that energy as fat because it's something that's quickly transitioned, quickly converted. And so sugar in a refined sense, where it's really just packed in there, super, super sweet things, yes, those are not bad. But sugar itself is good. It's a necessary nutrient that our bodies need for healthy levels of energy. So good sugars coming from fruits and things that are a little more naturally grown. Certainly not from a Snickers bar or from Sweet Tarts, which is my personal favorite. I love Sweet Tarts, but that is just packed in refined sugar. And so make sure you know that difference and can be able to identify the refined sugars from the regular sugars, because regular sugar is not bad. It is good for you, and it is something that you need. And so if you starve yourself of all sugar, then that is unhealthy, and your body will adapt to that by breaking down other carbohydrates, more complex carbohydrates, more quickly. All right, and then you're kind of back where you started. If you cut sugar for a year, your body's going to adapt to that, and you've not really gained anything, except that now when everyone else is eating cheesecake and you're not, it's kind of unpleasant. So that's myth number one. Number two, and this is mostly for our women: lifting weights makes you big and bulky. All right, also that is completely untrue. In fact, most people when they first lift weights, they actually get smaller. Because when you promote muscle mass, muscle tissue is very different than a lot of the rest of the tissues in the body, because it takes a lot of energy to support it. So you actually start burning more calories when you have more muscle mass. And so you lose a lot more fat a lot more quickly when you have a large amount of muscle mass, especially a lot more quickly than when you just try to run it off on the treadmill. Because what happens? You run on the treadmill for a week and then you quit. You gain it all back again, right? But having a lot of muscle tissue helps that stay down, because your body is trying to maintain that in a healthy way. All right, so lifting weights is not going to make you like Arnold, although personally I think that would be pretty awesome. It just doesn't work like that. All right, usually it makes you smaller first, and you have to really eat a lot of protein and a lot of good fat and a lot of things to get big and bulky. And for women, women don't have the same hormones as men do. They don't have the testosterone levels that men do, and so they're just not going to get big. And for most of the women, you're going, whew, thank goodness. That some women want to get big, and so that's a challenge to do. It's not going to happen if you go pick up some dumbbells and start working. It's not going to happen. All right. What is going to happen is you're going to become leaner, you're going to get stronger, and you're going to be a lot more prone to and resistant to injury. So you're out snow skiing, you're out walking, and something happens, you fall, and you hit that bone really hard. It's gonna be firm, and it's not going to break if you're trained with weights on a regular basis. Number three, fat is bad. Okay, that is a myth. Fat is not bad. Fat is good for you. Your body needs fat. In fact, your cells in your body have a nucleus around them that is composed of fatty tissue. And if you starve your body with fat, it will cause damage to every cell in your body, especially in the brain. So it's very, very bad to starve fat out of your diet. That fat is an essential nutrient. Now again, like with sugar, there are different kinds of fats. Okay, there are two primary kinds of fats: saturated fats and unsaturated fats. All right, and we can talk about polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and trans fat and all other things, but we don't have time to get into all that this morning. But know that there are good fats that are found in avocados and lean meats, as opposed to saturated fats that are mostly found in heavily processed foods. You know, Twinkies, and like when you go to the movie. I know I love popcorn, but when you go to the movie theater and they just pour the butter on, okay, that's a lot of saturated fat in there. You know, although you can get canola-based oiled products for your popcorn that have better, healthier fats for you. So again, it's choosing the healthy fats. It's choosing to eat those, lots of those, as opposed to eating the bad fats. In fact, I'll tell you, what I have learned in the world of physical fitness, one of the ways that I kept the weight off once I lost it is learn to eat a lot. If you will eat a lot of the right foods, you will be much leaner, and you won't be starving all the time. That's a nice benefit. You will become a lot leaner than if you try to cut certain foods and do all this dieting and everything like that. Being healthy is a lifestyle change. That's what we're talking about. Remember, self-control is the theme here. You're not just supposed to be self-controlled for a week or for a month, and then you just like reckless abandonment, and then I'm going to be self-controlled again. That's not self-control. All right, self-control is when you change a lifestyle. You change habits. We talked a little bit about substance abuse and addictions last week. When you end that behavior, when you stop those things and discontinue them in your life, that's a lifestyle change. That's something that goes on, and that's what we want to do is to change our workout and our eating habits permanently, forever. All right, and I think that a lot of people torture themselves with all these crazy diets and eating things that they do to themselves when it's unnecessary. God wouldn't have given us all this good food to eat if we were supposed to starve ourselves from it, or to somehow create certain foods that we shouldn't eat. Well, let's go on. Number 4, carbs are bad. Okay, how many low-carb diets are out there? All right, another myth. Carbs are good. They're a great source of energy. It's finding the right carbs. Eating oatmeal based carbs and wheat and barley and rye, those are great carbs. White flour, not so great. Okay, so again, it's learning which type of carbs to eat. I think you're seeing a theme here. Number 5, cardio is the most effective form of fat-burning exercise. That's false. We talked about that. Weightlifting is more effective because as you gain muscle mass, your body burns more calories. When you're laying in bed at night and you're sleeping and you're growing muscle tissue, you're burning more calories than you normally would if you didn't have that extra muscle tissue. So again, looking at that whole picture of being healthy and having bone mass and muscle mass and lean, what we call lean tissue in exercise physiology. Having that lean tissue causes your body to burn more calories, and then in turn you'll be leaner. So while cardio is good and healthy, and you should want to do cardiovascular exercise because it strengthens your heart, it strengthens your circulatory system. We talked about last week that clogged artery experience that I had. That's what it does. It cleans out your arteries. When your blood pressure is going and your blood circulating through your veins, it cleans that out. It naturally corrodes that restriction that's there, and it causes your veins and your arteries to become more elastic. Now, I really don't have a degree in exercise physiology. I just read a lot. All right, number 6, dieting a few times a year is an effective form of weight loss. If you go back and forth, what usually happens is you'll lose maybe 5 pounds, but then you'll gain 7 or 8. But then you lose 5 pounds again, but then you'll gain 7 or 8 again. And then it's that vicious cycle where you gain more and more and more. And of course, while you do that, you're kind of messing up your body because your body's not made to have strange things happen to it like that. It likes regularity. It likes a constant supply of fruit and vegetables and bread and lean meats. It likes those things. And when we start doing strange dieting things with it and starving ourselves off, that's just unnatural. That's not the way that your body was is made, and so we create problems for ourselves. Number 7, starving yourself is an effective form of weightlessness. There's actually cults that practice this. I think that there is even some spiritual warfare involved with this particular belief, because in a lot of cultures they try to starve themselves out. If you think a little bit about the Brahmins, you think about the Jains who believe that pain is kind of one of the pillars of understanding in life. There are a lot of cults and demonic powers and belief systems that tell us that if we'll just torture ourselves in some way or cause ourselves intense pain and suffering, then somehow we're going to gain something from that. And certainly that is untrue in being healthy. I mean, God created our bodies to eat nuts and berries and fruits and things that grow from the ground. And so we ought to eat those things to be healthy. And it's, again, the question of eating the right things and the right portion of things. Sometimes we do have a tendency just to sit down and just eat everything inside, and then we sit down, 5 hours later and do the same thing over and over and over again. And so we have to learn to have self-control with what we choose, not only what we choose, but how often we choose and what amounts and portions that we choose to eat those foods. Number 8, dieting is an effective form of weight loss. Well, of course, we talked about the lifestyle change and the importance of that. If we go back and forth choosing certain diets, maybe low carb, maybe low fat, maybe we buy some kind of diet pills that like a thermogenic that causes our body to burn more calories per hour or something like that. The problem is always when we stop. Whatever it is, if you stop doing that, you're going to gain everything back that you've lost, and so there has to be a lifestyle change. You cannot diet on and off or subscribe to some kind of product or something of that nature and expect to have a lifestyle change. It just doesn't work that way. 9, I mentioned about skinny people being fat. A lot of times we look at someone and think, wow, I wish I could look like that in a bathing suit, or wow, they must be really healthy and fit. And you put them on a treadmill, and after 3 minutes they're about to have a heart attack because they're so out of breath. It doesn't work that way. Some people are just blessed with certain hormones and genes that cause them to be small. And, I am not one of those people. I can, if I just kind of live by the natural man and I let the flesh rule and I throw self-control out the window, I can get really big really fast. I'm just blessed that way. That's just how my genes work. So I'm not like that. But other people are not. They're just small no matter what they do. They can eat a horse and they're still small. So unless we implement in our life truth, and we implement understanding and right motivation and right knowledge, and we apply that on a regular ongoing basis, we're not going to see the changes in our health that we want to see and that we need to see. All right, and then finally, the last myth: some people just can't be fit and healthy. Certainly that is untrue. There are medical conditions that some people have with their thyroid. Of course, certain injuries that prevent people from being able to work out as easily as others. And so that can affect that. Our hormone levels is something that, to a large extent, are biological. We're born with certain levels of testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, and so a lot of those things they affect us, and so we can't. You can't compare yourself to your best friend, and they go in the gym and work out 3 days a week. You may have to go in 5 days a week for the same result. So yeah, it's not fair. And there's nothing, I don't think there's anything that could be done about that. But it doesn't negate the truth that we still have the choice, and it might be more difficult for us or less difficult, but it might be more difficult. At least in my case, I think it's probably a little bit more difficult for me than for some others. We still have that option because God has given us truth. He's given us the Spirit that can transform us, that can change us. And for me, this was, and I've kind of targeted this day as kind of a practical application day. More, last week was kind of more of our theological day, looking at it and talking about it more from the self-control perspective. But for me, this began a series of changes in my life because I looked at something that was just seemed big. You know, for me, I kind of believed that last myth that it was going to be impossible for me, that there was nothing that I could do to be healthy and to be fit and to be able to, you know, I had a goal of running a 5K, which I did back years ago and ran it in 25 minutes. You know, there was things I just thought I would never do that. I will never be able to do that. And I just wanted to kind of lay down and give up. But because I had made the decision, I had set before me the task of allowing God to change me, to teach me that I could make decisions to choose to do what I didn't want to do. I mean, I never wanted to get on the treadmill. I never wanted to pick up a weight. I never wanted to not eat that cheesecake or eat that, you know, there's eating things, you know, like I had to learn to eat broccoli and some vegetables, you know, that I just, you know, I'm kind of a pizza and grilled cheese kind of guy. You know, I just don't naturally wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'd like some fresh blueberries, or wow, you know, some strawberries sounds nice, you know. Excuse me. That's just not me. You know, I like those big, you know, I want a big steak and potatoes and butter. You know, I just want like as much butter as there is potato, and I had to kind of retrain myself to think differently about that. And God did that through me, and it became a catalyst. All right. It became a catalyst for other areas in my life because I learned that I could have self-control with my health. Then I thought, wow, there's other things in my life that I can have that same self-control. And so I began to take those same principles, that same understanding of right motivation versus wrong motivation, of how God made me and created me and what His purpose is for me. And it began to change a lot of things in my life. And I began to realize what that verse about being transformed by the renewing of your mind, I began to realize what that really means. I began to recognize how difficult that path is. You know, it's not an overnight thing. It's not something you can do in 5 weeks or 12 weeks. It's something that has to change from this point on. You know, if you're stuck, just addicted to alcohol, addicted to some substance, it has to be a lifetime change. You can't just quit for a while and go back, and it doesn't work that way. You've got to allow God to transform you, to change you, so that the person that you were, you no longer are. So as we kind of begin to bring this down a little bit and kind of personalize a little bit for each of us, I want you to think for just a minute about yourself, about your personality, about who you are, the decisions that you make. Are you a self-controlled person or not? I mean, do you basically, I mean, here's what we're asking. Here's what I'm asking when I say that. Do you basically get out of bed in the morning and just do whatever you feel like doing? Or do you get out of bed in the morning and fall flat on your face and say, God, what is it that I'm to do today? And surrender to His will in your day. I mean, that's going to change a whole lot more than just your eating habits, your workout habits. It should change how you spend your time, who you spend it with, what the content of that time is. I mean, it's a life-changing question. And so maybe today, as you're kind of thinking about health and fitness, and man, you know, I can do it this time. I'm going to be lean. I'm going to, you know, whatever that health issue that I'm struggling with, you know, maybe I can't sleep at night. I'm going to fix it through exercise. That is awesome. That is really good, and that will be a life-changing thing. And maybe that's what's got you excited right now. But I want you to draw a little line and connect some dots here to that truth and this underlying idea of being transformed by the renewing of your mind. You know, if we just stand around and wait for God to change us, He's the catalyst that ignites that. But we have to choose to follow Him. We have to choose to be obedient. And if that weren't the case, God would have just created us all to be robots to some extent. We would just glorify Him and worship Him and do His will perfectly. And there wouldn't be a question of sin. There wouldn't be a question of choosing to go against His will. We would just do those things. But that's not the system that we exist in. We have choice, and it's not just a choice for salvation. It's a choice to follow Him every day. It's the choice to live by His desires, by His commands. And last week we looked at Galatians, and this is where our word self-control comes from the fruit of the Spirit. And we are to manifest those things in our life. Patience and kindness, self-control. It's supposed to be manifest, to come out of our life, that if we really belong to Him, then those things will be evident in our life. So what does that mean? What that means is if it's evident, it means that you don't have to say anything about it. You don't have to post it on Facebook, or you don't have to Twitter it, or tweet it, I guess, to use the right terminology there, or blog it, or tell whomever. It should be evident. It should be apparent. That fruit should be there. Someone should be able to look at us and see how we're living and go, wow, that person is manifesting the fruit of God in their life. That's how we know. It's so difficult now. Everybody's saying, oh, I'm a Christian. Oh, I'm not a Christian. It's so easy to really know if you really think about it. Jesus has said, this is how we ought to live. These are the things that come from a life that follows Jesus. And then we have another list that we looked at last week, the list of those works of the flesh. And these are the list of people that don't follow me. This is a list of what people, it's evident in their life when they're far from me. All right, so we can look at those lists, and we need to compare ourselves, not our neighbor. Right now we've been thinking, oh, well, my sister or my best friend or, my son, my daughter. No, we need to be looking at ourselves and saying, which one of those lists is evident in my life? Because that's how we can know if we're really following Christ. We may say that, and we may have a great voice, and we might come and sing on the worship team, or we might preach a great sermon. We might go and lead our students, or whatever it is. And we might have some great gift that we're doing. But if all of our works, or if most of our works, or many of our works are of the flesh and not of the Spirit, then we're not really following Him. And you know what the real problem with that is? Even beyond our own personal self that's being effective there, is that we're leading all the people around us. We're leading them in the wrong direction. So we're going to take just a few moments as Annette comes and plays, and we're going to kind of think hard. And I know this is hard. I know that right now you probably feel like I am pointing a great big mean nasty finger at you. And I really don't want to do that. But at the same time, I've got to challenge you the way that God challenges me, and the way that others have challenged me, to ask the hard questions in my life, to say, man, am I self-controlled? Is the Spirit of God alive in me? And so therefore I do those things, not that the flesh wants or the natural man wants, but those things that God wants me to do. Do I wake up and do those things? Or do I just wake up and do whatever feels good to me? Because you know what? It does feel good to sit on the couch. Man, it is, going to Ukraine, going to Mexico, those are some of the hardest things I've ever done, because I had to give up all the foods I like to eat. I had to give up a lot of good sleep at night and a comfortable bed and being warm or being in the air conditioning. I had to give up a lot of those things that I want. But when we serve God, that's what happens sometimes. We don't do what we want. We do what He wants. But we can only do that so long on our own power. We might do it for a few weeks at the beginning of the year. We might do it for a day. We might even do it for a year. But unless God changes us from the inside out, it'll never be a change that's lasting. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to stand. If there's anyone that needs to come talk to me, maybe you're here this morning and you've heard some of this stuff, and a couple things have caused you to think a little bit about your life and what you believe. Maybe you don't believe any of that. Maybe you don't even really know that God that wants you to follow Him. And maybe you need to talk with someone. I'm going to be right down here. Let's just take a few moments and let's just look inwardly and pray. If someone needs to talk about it, I'll be down here. And then I'll close this in prayer in just a moment.